So we're going to do this anyway. Thank you all for coming. Thank Digital Hollywood and CES for having us. This is the Digital Hollywood CES Immersive Media Leadership Think Tank. Probably some of the smartest people I've ever spoken to on the phone, because I haven't met them personally until today, to talk about some of the things going on in immersive media and VR and AR and MR and all the different Rs that are out there. But I don't want this to be AR 101. So if you expected to come in here and learn about AR 101, you can just get up and go away right now, because we're going to talk about stuff that's new and innovative and cutting edge. I want to start by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us what companies they represent, and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about, starting all the way in that end with Raffaella.
Good afternoon, my name is Raffaella Camera. I'm with Accenture Extended Reality, and I head up our global marketing innovation strategy.
Afternoon, my name is Patrick Costello. I'm with Qualcomm Technologies, and I'm the North American biz dev lead for our XR business. So that means I engage a lot with OEMs, ODMs, ISVs, IHVs, content partners, studios, and partners like Accenture in the region.
Hi everybody, I'm Ted. I'm the futurist at Paramount Pictures, so I have an interesting job in an interesting world of make-believe.
And a great title.
And a good title. But before you go on, does anybody remember the game show Match Game back in the day? Come on, look at this microphone, right?
Hi, good afternoon and welcome to CES. My name is Ravi Vella. I work for Intel Corporation, mostly responsible for driving immersive cinema, immersive media, and figuring out what to do next.
I'm Steve Sullivan. I'm with Microsoft. I head up the Mixed Reality Capture Studios program. We do holographic video.
Hi, I'm Preeti Patel. I'm SVP at RGA New York. I manage and develop tech strategy, innovation, and delivery for all our clients.
So thank you all very much. Because I don't know what to say when you talk about great people like this. So I'm going to throw out one question I want to ask everybody about before we go individually down the road and see what each individual group is up to. VR had so much hype going into the last, say, couple of years, for sure, and definitely within the last 5 years. It was the end-all and be-all, the new entertainment methodology, great for distribution, great for consumption, content is king, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden, people started to realize, it seems to me, that there was a barrier to entry, and the barrier to entry may have been the headset. Then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, there are these great big place-based things that companies like The Void are doing, that all of a sudden now, oh, look at this, VR has a new life, and then there was an upswing. Where are we in that VR sort of bell curve right now? Is it place-based? Is it personal? Is it consumer? Is it business? Tell me a little bit about that. Let's start with you, Raffaella.
Well, certainly for us, we see a great usage of extended reality in general, so both AR and VR on the enterprise side. And in fact, our goal is really to help our clients be first movers and leaders in using XR to solve for any part of their value chain. So for us, it's very, very much alive and kicking, very much at the beginning, but there is a need and it's being used already. So we're doing things like AR-based connected worker solutions to help workers that are out in the field with virtual solutions. We are looking at customer platforms that are XR-based to help consumers experience products seamlessly, going from 2D to AR to VR. And we're even doing things like merchandising in VR, so reinventing the way that brands and retailers.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, and then you're actually going to make an announcement that, so if there's any of the journalists in the room who want to listen.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there may be some news maybe. Anyone else want to grab this question before about where we sit? Is it place-based? Is it consumer? Is it, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above. The way that I study these things is I look at things in their 10-year sort of evolution span, and we're about 4 years into the 10-year curve. The current sort of state of head-mounted spatial screens, which we commonly call virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality in all of its forms, really started its kind of current rebirth around 2013, 2014. So now we're 2018, 2019, we're kind of almost to the halfway point. And you're starting seeing like the first level of maturity and mostly failure of most of the first gen or not even first gen devices that are existing and live in kind of this micro success community, of which we can talk about at length if you want. And then the second wave of the spit and polish is now being applied. So we're learning everything that we did wrong to try and move this from an industrial mostly use case or a heavy use case into a true consumer use case, which will exist from the 2019 to 2025 range. So likely by 2024, 2025, you'll have 2 or 3 more full cycles of the HMDs as they exist and real consumer demand and desire for them at scale.
What's the distribution platform that makes that work for everybody?
Well, that's kind of an interesting challenge right now, is that all of the companies that are building and building their ecosystem around these devices have built their own little walled gardens. There is no centralized system other than Steam for the gamers for the most part, but now Unreal is even challenging that and putting up their own walled garden. So Oculus has their own store, Sony has their own store, Magic Leap will have their own store that's evolving, Microsoft has its own store. So they're all trying to bring the hardware, software thing together in one thing, and that's of course.
And good luck with that, because I still have a Betamax. Anyone else want to catch this?
Yeah, so if you look at hype curve, this is no longer emerging technology. This is already being emerged. So that's actually what Ted has alluded. A lot of things this industry has been learning and now getting on to the next phase. That's what the transformation that we are experiencing.
But is there a barrier to entry still?
Sure.
And what is it?
Well, it's multiple things. I mean, you have, people that have heard me talk, I talk about the BOF problems, box on face. These devices today, for the most part, are boxes on your face. And that's not stylistically, holistically proper for where the future's going, which is why most of my energy is looking at what are called mixed reality headsets that will eventually start to look like eyewear, like your glasses.
If you ever saw the TV show, the sci-fi TV show called Halcyon, greatest pair of goggles I've ever seen in my life, because you wear them, they look very cool. Let's go back to Rafaela and Patrick a little bit, because one of the projects that you've been working on, which I think is most interesting, is virtual merchandising. And let's see if I can get this video to come up. For some reason, it doesn't seem to. Good. So, and what strikes me is the thing about virtual merchandising, which will be explained in this video. We'll let Patrick and Rafaela talk about it. Is the play is almost not so much VR and AR as it is gathering data. So at least from what I've understood about this project and how it can work for a company like Accenture as a management consulting company working with a company like Qualcomm to solve a third party's problem. What does that third party see from it immediately? If there's not actual money coming back to them, what's the ROI? They're getting data out of this. You want to talk a little bit about it and set this tape up?
Yeah, and going back to your comment, you're absolutely correct. We see VR or AR as an ingredient, really not as the main focus, but as a different way to solve for a problem that already exists. It's just a different way of navigating or capturing data or anything else like that. So when it comes to merchandising, as I was saying, we very much look at how can we help our companies and enterprises, our clients, help do things differently. Merchandising is the art or the science of figuring out where to place products, product placement and assortment in store to maximize sales. We decided to try to rework the way that it's done and reinvent it with VR to help companies do it faster, cheaper, and at larger scale. So the scenario was Kellogg's was launching a new product, Pop-Tart Bites, and we basically recreated the same test in VR. And at the end, we found that VR with eye tracking provided us with more holistic data and a total 18% lift in branded sales, which was a huge result for us.
So how did the two of you come together? And I'll show this tape in a couple of minutes, but it's interesting to me, the dynamic between you two. Who's the client? The third person? Is Qualcomm the client? Is the third party? How does that work?
Yeah, we joke about that actually a lot, but as a technology enabler, you know, Qualcomm is very focused on pushing the edge of innovation. So we basically, the Snapdragon platform is powered mostly all-in-one VR headsets that are on the market today, the first generation of devices. So considering looking for new features to integrate into those platforms, we worked with a partner called Tobii, which they have an eye tracking platform. We then went to our partners Accenture, and they made it very easy for us. They helped define the full proof of concept. They pulled together all the right partners in context and cognitive 3D. And we told them, here's what we really want to show, because this is the next generation of the platform, the new technology.
Well, but was this also the next generation of a chip that you guys had created that made this work better?
Yeah, it was our newest 845 platform, so our flagship tier chipset of the Snapdragon 845. So it supported room scale 6 degrees of freedom, and then we on our reference design, which is not a commercial device, but the reference hardware that we provide to OEMs to help them accelerate their products to market, we actually integrated Tobii in that device for them so they could see it, and that's what we really wanted to showcase with this.
So let's take a look at this, and I have my fingers crossed that you'll be able to hear this. Here we go.
Studies have shown that shopping in virtual reality closely reflects real-world behaviors. With a virtual store, it's much easier to quickly alter variables like placement, assortment, or signage to test different configurations and then see how those changes impact purchasing outcomes.
Using a mobile VR solution, unencumbered by restrictive heavy cables, liberates the user to tour the virtual supermarket while the eye tracking technology is doing its job, giving us the new layer of valuable data about the shopper's attention and focus.
Kellogg's was launching a new product, Pop-Tarts Bites. They needed market data to determine placement, assortment, and the marketing strategy in store.
So in our first testing scenario, we placed the product on a high shelf and added promotional signage and captured shoppers' eye movements as they looked at virtual shelf. We can see their eyes were drawn to the sign and nearby products. This even helped visibility of other brands placed above the Pop-Tarts Bites.
In our second scenario, we placed the product and sign on a lower shelf.
Please. There's not much left. I gotta move it. No. Okay, so let's move on. I'm so sorry. I actually don't have anything to say other than. Is that okay, Raphael?
I love it. Yeah.
So one last comment just on the project, and I want to thank the other panelists for
real-world
their
behaviors.
patience
With a
as we
virtual store.
we start over.
So it's rolling again. I'm going to stop it because I think we can talk. Do you get an idea of what the product is and what they did from what you've seen already? And I'm going to go back to everybody knows that when you go into a grocery store, that a product is put somewhere so that it gets your eye in there. You'll want to buy that product because maybe subliminally it's there, it's in front of you, but there's signage in front of it that says maybe it's on sale, and there's signage after it that if you didn't buy this product. So you had to go through this either qualitative or quantitative analysis going into that. Which did you use all the different types of analytic tools in order to make that product work, or how did that come about? Because what's fascinating to me here is that it's the use of this immersive reality in a brand situation in a store.
I can talk. So we already knew that the test had already been done with traditional testing methods. That means in-home user tests or online surveys. So we knew the results. And normally, when it's a new product, consumers expect to find it higher up on a shelf. So we tested the whole scenario again, and we tried higher up on a shelf, and we also tried lower on a shelf. And what VR did is not only, first off, it showed that there is a high degree of correlation between the results of the two tests, so we know that VR works. But then eye tracking gave us additional information. Specifically, we were able to see what consumers were looking at in addition to those specific products. And that led us to a completely different merchandising conclusion, that was to actually place the product below, because that lifted the sales of all the other branded products around it.
I thought that was an interesting outcome when I saw the video for the first time. Would have felt normal to me to see the product up higher. And when your data came, said no, having it below will help rise the boats above it. So if it's, here's the company is the flotilla. One boat rises, all boats rise.
Correct.
Well-
So it's a more holistic solution.
Well, is this is now productized? Yes?
I was just going to comment that it may seem obvious and intuitive that, yeah, where someone looks as a precursor to where what they're going to purchasing intent is going to be, but the level of data that the platform provides, the merchandiser or the researcher in this case, also, it's not only where the user is looking, but also where the user may not be looking, and that's also valuable data that the
And you couldn't do
merchandiser
this in a non-immersive environment.
That's exactly correct. We would have not been able to do it.
So before I move on, because we could talk about this until the cows came home, I know. That's the problem with these kinds of panels. You find something really interesting and you go, yeah, that's great, let's move on. I do want to move on, and I'm going to talk to Ted and Ravi now about something that's diametrically, I don't want to say opposed, but it's diametric to the brand proposition that Qualcomm and Accenture were talking about. You're talking about the entertainment world. Now, Ravi has done some of the most amazing virtual experiences, whether he did the one for Last Man, the one for Dunkirk. I mean, just some mind-blowing stuff. And he's done some of this stuff with Ted. And there's something new coming. Tell me a little bit about what is it that's new about what it is you're doing, and why is it maybe the future of entertainment? Would you say that?
Sure. So in order to look at future of entertainment, we had to go back in the past. So 150 years back, a pioneer photographer named Edward Muybridge, he shot first sequence, which is 24 horse in motion. And from that, transformation happened, right from the Disney's multi-plane cameras and all the rigs that we see, from how the sound came into the movies, then the color, then all the transition from HD, 4K, even like some of the things we are driving in 8K. So next piece of puzzle is the immersive format, which is where the VR, AR, XR came into picture. But even pushing the boundaries, at Intel, we don't like to just talk about predict the future, we like to create it. So part of this fun stuff was, last year at CES, Jim Giannopoulos, CEO from Paramount and Intel, we announced we're going to collaborate something. And that's the same time we announced Intel Studio Facility. In fact, person who heads the facility, Diego, is in the audience. Feel free to grab his brain after this panel. And we decided to take an iconic property from 1978, which we'll show in one moment. And the reason why we picked a property from that side is, imagine if we apply the 21st century and the technologies of the future for our beloved movies of the past, we can start a radical new transformation when it comes to immersive experience or immersive cinema. And that's where Ted is not new to volumetric. He's been doing for several years now. And we've been witnessing that journey for almost every year. So it was where we're storytellers and the technologies comes together. And our humble attempt to kind of bring it to word, I mean, again, still very exploratory and very early phase of technology, but it's our attempt. And if you could roll, or unless, Ted, you want to say something?
Roll, show it, when we talk about it.
Okay.
It's
My
still the word.
apologies to our first team of contestants. Here we go.
By dorm,
Just going on 30. What do you think?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
When we made Greece, none of us knew that it was going to take off, and especially 40 years later that people would still be loving it all over the world. And it's exciting to be able to do something with this new cutting-edge technology.
I'm very excited that you're all here.
Well, welcome to Intel Studios. So today we are filming a very special promotion celebrating the 40th anniversary of Greece. We have 22 different dancers, all from the famous Millennium Studios in LA.
7 and an 8 and a 1 that I want.
We have David Moore as our choreographer, and we are so lucky to be able to have the original director, Randall Kleiser.
You're looking at her and you can't keep your eyes off her.
We are now going to go to work.
Today is as a result of a partnership between Intel and Paramount Pictures for the volumetric capture of Greece in VR.
The beauty of this partnership, this project that we're working on, is to explore the unknown. And the reasons we're exploring volumetric video for this project is part of this very long view exploration of how technology affects motion picture capture.
1, playback.
This year we have been following along many years the whole idea of volumetric capture. which combining with a game engine, we can eventually take actors and put them into a game engine. And this is what I think will be the future of filmmaking.
If you've seen the film, it's a lot of people. It's not a little tiny experience. It's a very big movie with a lot of big dance numbers. And Randall wanted to do a big volumetric dance number.
When I first walked in this, I was just amazed by the size and scope of this dome. It's gigantic. And Orson Welles said that a movie studio is the biggest train set a boy could have. And this is like a Superliner train set.
We're really enabling the storytellers and the creators to open the barriers of immersiveness and to really bring that iconic story from a 2D world to a really immersive world.
This initiative is important because Paramount and Intel both are at the forefront of digital transformation, especially when it comes to immersive cinema.
It's exciting because with volumetric, you're able to have the dancers all spread out in different space and different angles, and just to be able to swing around that volumetrically from any camera angle, director's angle, or point of view, that would be amazing.
Volumetric to me is kind of the next piece of the puzzle. It's the next thing that actually will have massive, massive abilities and capabilities that we're just starting to scratch the surface on. We don't really even know where it's going yet.
It's a chance for me to do something cutting edge, and I'm always interested in that.
So that's pretty amazing. That is an announcement that you guys are making here at this panel. So that's number 2. Tell us about exactly. I also want to know this. You raised 3 issues there. One about implanting an actor into a scene that's volumetrically captured. I'm thinking Thanos in the Avengers movie, for example. Then the other thing is making this material in this dome, which is pretty specific. And 3, where do I see this? Okay. I don't mean tomorrow people can go and see it over in the hall, but where am I going to see this if I'm just a viewer?
Sure. So you'll see the first touch of this at CES with a very specialized teaser piece that we created that effectively we would call it a volumetric motion picture poster or a one sheet, and you'll see the actual volumetric output, which there's a whole collection of the team right there trying to hide that have been busy like beavers working away with lots and lots of Intel computers making this all happen for CES. But if you kind of look at the broad reason for us to do this, right, and why we go down this path, if you kind of track the entire history of the cinematic experience and cinematic goals, it's to try and reproduce things that happen in real life, right? So the initial ideas of how can we capture something and make it feel like it's real, like we believe it's real. So we've evolved that for 130-something years now, from black and white to color to high resolution to starting to mess with what we call two-dimensional pixels and make you believe that there's depth in those two-dimensional pixels, and that's stereoscopy or 3D. But we've yet to actually accomplish creating volume of human beings and objects on a motion picture screen or a television screen or a mobile screen yet. We're on the cusp of that. And there are a number of companies working on it. Intel's working on it. We're working on it from a creative standpoint. Microsoft is working on it. There's 6 or 7 companies that are dancing around the problem, trying to solve the next level of how do we get to even more realism to recreate the real world, which is effectively
now. Let's talk about the equipment for a second. The LiDAR cameras, the new volumetric cameras, are they the thing that's going to help make this work?
It's part of the puzzle.
And how about the sound? I mean, you're taking something that everybody knows, the movie Grease, and you're placing it in a situation where the director of that original movie may not have said, I want the attention of that eyeball over there, not over here. And in the 360 world, you're the director. So your eye is going to go where your eye wants to go. How do you make that work inside of a situation where that requires somebody to actually have to think about doing something?
So audio is pretty important to us, and Frank, we had offline conversation. First project, Lamas, which done with AR Rahman, we use Auto 3D as a sound. So in fact, there is a certain sequences, screen is completely blank, and director can drive entire attention just using your sound. Sound is absolutely paramount importance, and hopefully tomorrow you will see some of the sound advancement which will be showing at Intel booth as well.
Now,
with this
in
property.
the mask as well, you had an additional sense. So not only did you have haptics,
We had aroma also.
VR, and aroma.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about bringing in all of the senses into one immersive experience.
Yeah. So this
you
of
have
course.
you have to be sitting somewhere to make that work. Don't
Yeah.
you? That's not the void where you move around. There's some haptics and there's some interaction. You're actually sitting somewhere.
So tomorrow, I mean, what you will see, this interactive poster, you don't have to put any glasses. How the volumetric technology has been put into practice in traditional filmmaking is also an example. That's also you can see. But just looking at the sheer number, I just want to, since this is a very technical audience, so more than 5 trillion pixels were used to capture this one. 70 plus cameras were used in that dome that you see. 250 MB data per second. Dashboard data. So imagine all the post-processing challenge and creating that, and we're just scratching the surface. And this is from room scale to, like, I call it like a Walmart size of Walmart or full sound stage. It's a 25,000 square feet. You can literally put the entire Broadway show inside that, capture whatever the light can see. That is in a voxel. I mean, we are kind of coining this term from moving from pixels to voxels. Voxel is a pixel in volume, which has a depth information and different color information. And that you will see some amazing like thing. You can watch movie if you do it in volumetric from any point of time and from any character's point of view. That opens a complete new level of immersiveness, and the sky's the limit as if you keep exploring this one.
Okay, because you're doing this as much or more than anybody else in the industry, as I know, Steve, you're also doing it too. Sounds to me like you've taken this volumetric capture, create this content, and given the editor so much more content to work with. Yes? So
yes.
in
Actually,
essence,
yes, yeah.
does the editor not become the second director?
Well, that's already happened with traditional two-dimensional media. Very often editors do become directors because they're good at directing the audience's attention to what they think the story should derive. I think it's kind of a mistake or a misnomer to think about the fact that just because you're shooting something volumetrically or with 3D capture, that you can't direct the audience to what you want to see. You absolutely can. You absolutely can tell very specific narrative in very specific ways to achieve the objective. There's a lot to be learned from video game language about how you have the impression that you can look anywhere and do anything, even though the auteurs of that are actually creating something that's really valuable and pushing you down the rabbit hole that 95% of the audience will go down.
Right.
The same thing will happen here.
So Ravi and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago talking about spatial audio and how spatial audio can help make that work even better from the perspective of the end user, which is, you know, the viewer. But are we, again, not only talking about something that one person at a time can operate and can work with?
That's a huge challenge. I mean, that's part of what we're working on is that singular point of view inside a VR headset, and how do you take it to scale? And is an HMD the most appropriate way to take something to scale, right? You learn things from looking at the theme park industry about how they create giant simulations, spatial simulations at scale when they're pushing hundreds of people a minute through something, as opposed to some of the challenges of like the VR LBEs that are experimenting with business models with really individualized consumer headsets that are really not designed to go to at-number scale. So we're kind of in that dance right now.
Right.
And that's part of that 10-year curve of figuring out what are the really appropriate technologies to take into a location-based entertainment theme park style experience versus something that will live in the home or mobile.
And of course you know that the sounds of the pirates, there are no pirates there.
And one thing to add here, VR is a tool that extenuates the storytelling. So you start with the good storytelling, and one of the things that you and me mentioned earlier, motion creates emotion. A lot of the earlier experience that we did, we put it in a positron chair. We did kind of like a rotate, where a director wants to direct you towards a particular scene. So motion rotates. I mean, First Man is a perfect example, that virtual reality experience, how we can take the whole space shuttle and land on the moon and come back safely. So there's been a lot of experimentation is going on, and we've been learning a lot.
Well, so now we've talked a little bit about how we can use a VR in the virtual reality world in the packaged goods arena, in the entertainment arena. So I want to actually, Steve, if you don't mind, skip over and talk to Preeti a little bit about RGA. So if you're familiar with RGA, it's probably the preeminent digital advertising agency next to Definition 6, I must say. The preeminent digital advertising agency, and they're located in New York as well. And I met Bob Greenberg when he was did you say hi to him?
I did say hi to him.
When he was just doing Greenberg and Associates, and they did graphics, and we had to make some graphics for NBC, and my God, they were expensive. So tell us a little bit about what RGA does in this space, and then what you do at RGA, and I'll bring up some of your slides, and then you can say to me, let's switch slides, okay? Tell me a little bit about it.
So at RGA, we're very passionate about innovation, digital transformation at speed, redefining acceleration, right? So we're hearing here about all of these cool technologies and how all these different pieces come together to create immersive experiences, and where people are taking them. How do you bring all of this together without it being overwhelming? So at RGA, we've come up with Venture Studios. And Venture Studios essentially we work with our corporate partners to understand their goals, their vision, their objectives, and then match them to startups and emerging technologies to see, which is the best fit, what is a cost-effective, low-risk way of actually bringing something to life. And we've done this very effectively for a lot of our clients.
So you're next slide. You're an accelerator, but an internal accelerator. You're not relying on some external fund to help get these startups going.
That's right. We are essentially, using innovative ways, partnering with various corporations and organizations and with startups, and seeing what would be a lucrative partnership. And how we see this is an ecosystem of solutions, right? So what is essential to any of these technologies or methodologies being successful is an agile, quick and easy way of getting it up and running. So instead of reinventing the wheel and having, the burden of kind of having to figure it out every time, it's kind of getting those building blocks in place and then putting them together and providing solutions.
So it's interesting too, because you're a marketing agency.
Right.
And it actually begs the question, maybe putting the brakes on and making a hard left turn here, but how do you use virtual reality in marketing?
Multiple ways, right? So for example, with Guineas, we kind of created something called a Sip for Your Senses, which was essentially VR extended out using human senses to enhance the aromas and the flavors. So that was one good way of, kind of enhancing the experience. But we work across multiple verticals, so there's so many opportunities with various clients. We've worked with Nike, we've worked with IKEA, we've worked with various organizations.
I'm hearing a pretty consistent theme here, and that is that everybody that's doing something that's a little bit different, those things do dovetail. Everybody needs to be working together in this field, regardless of whether you're big or small, whether you're an Accenture or a Definition 6, whatever it is that you do, whatever you say, fits into that formula and works. Now you have this particular issue in that not only do you have to figure out how this immersive media works for your clients, don't they also come to you as a marketer?
They do, and we actually, I wouldn't call, that is a challenge, but we also kind of have, I would say, an advantage because we kind of see the holistic view, right? So we're looking at this not as a fragmented experience, not just from the consumer end or the business end, we're looking at it from a holistic point of view. So the future, as we see it, of immersive technology is ambient, multi-experience environments.
So, but you have to give your clients more than just an ambient, multi-experience environment. You have to give them information.
Right.
So how does that work inside your company? How do you go about doing it?
So the way we do that is, again, in an agile way, is with prototyping and kind of coming up with a quick solution, testing and refining. And we're able to do that because of our ecosystem.
I was just flipping down this to the
portfolio
overview.
Yeah, so essentially, with our ventures partners, what we have is are building blocks, as we were kind of talking about the different pieces, right? So one of the ventures partners is Cognitive 3D, and they provide analytics behind the VR solution. So a good example is IKEA. IKEA uses them to kind of gather all the data about a user's demographic information, geographic information, and then they're using it to kind of improve on their solution worldwide. The other one is,
And they have delicious meatballs, so you can try in virtual reality.
Sensible Object, yeah, that they provide a gaming solution across digital and physical worlds. And then we have Oaks, which provides solutions for retailers. They have smart mirrors that kind of create a connected fitting room. So as you can see, it's a wide range of solutions. And because we have a wide range of clients, we pride ourselves in being able to be agile and nimble in finding solutions. And sometimes we find an overlap, and that's great too. So we're not reinventing the wheel every time.
So do all of these technologies need to have different distribution systems? Can't they have a single distribution system? We go back to what you were talking about, Ted. And what is that? Why is that not happening? Isn't it something everybody knows, but not necessarily something everybody's dealing with?
Because there's commerce and there's money, and everybody wants to make their land grab, right? Everybody wants to see, can they be the next big platform? And no one is really willing to kind of collaborate on it to say, well, let's do the rising tide. Now, in the case of what we're doing in the volumetric world, we were just talking about this before the talk, we actually see this as a place that collaboration is really important because it's so early and there's so many things that we're doing wrong on the way to get right. Like, none of this stuff is really right yet. It's actually more wrong than right. It just has the essence of being right. So we want to put lots of companies together, lots of different enablers, lots of different thoughts, lots of different approaches to attack the problem and give a toolkit to cinematographers and movie directors that will probably likely use 10 or 15 different companies to achieve the objective, just like we do with traditional two-dimensional photography. And that's kind of where...
But is there enough space out there in the world for all the different companies?
No, indeed, and one thing like my group is pioneered Intel for doing a lot of media standards, right, from the readers to DVD days and Blu-rays. Those are the things we standardize. And in order to require, we have to have like a lot of consortium come together, companies. And as volumetric, as Ted mentioned, this is a perfect marriage between the storytellers and the technologist, because one cannot survive without the other. Because what we are seeing on the cusp of data-driven entertainment, and that requires cross-learning from all the industry, not just two of us, including the distribution and so on. So standardization is also one more way. For example, like point cloud, those compressions, those are so complex technologies. If you want to reach to masses, we need to have like a wider adoption, and wider companies to come together as a part of consortium to drive this thing forward. But at least we are getting something started here.
Well, let's talk to Steve a little bit about what Microsoft is doing. And it also sounds to me like a lot of what everyone is talking about has sort of gone down the pipe and come out at your end, which is this whole idea of collaboration and creating systems that can work for people, to change behavior, to make things happen, to make people see something differently. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are up to.
Yeah, sure. Our journey in volumetric video started about 8 years ago based on some research from Microsoft Research. And it was before this current wave of mixed reality devices. This seems like a pretty interesting concept in a way that people might want to have media in the future. And about the time we got to a certain level of maturity, we thought, hey, this could be interesting for a product. HoloLens was coming along. And people thought, well, this is kind of cool and interesting, but what are you going to use it for? But then when we saw HoloLens coming online, it was like, oh yes, if you're going to have humans in these immersive experiences, you have to have something like volumetric video. And so we graduated right into that team and stayed with them for a couple of years, launched with them. And then since that happened, we decided mixed reality is going to be a thing. Having human beings in these experiences is going to be critical to adoption and engagement in these experiences. So let's push either both ourselves and working with partners and collaborators on making human beings a viable piece of content for these mixed reality experiences, whether it be our devices or phones or Magic Leap, whatever. We're actually agnostic to platform. We care more about people wanting to engage mixed reality.
Are you talking about holograms?
Yes. We call them holograms. Obviously, it's an abuse of the term. but it's a 3D asset that looks and feels like holograms when you're in these immersive devices.
Shall we take a look?
Sure.
Other piece of tape coming? Here we go.
Welcome to London's Natural History Museum.
The work with Microsoft primarily for individual clients, or are you doing the work for Microsoft?
Mostly commercial clients. We were internal for quite a long time. We did thousands of captures, and it really honed the technology working internally. And then about a year and a half ago, we decided to go commercial. And we've done dozens of projects by now, thousands of captures. We have our home-based stage is in San Francisco, and we also license the technology to partners in London, which is Dimension Studios, and then in Los Angeles with Metastage, and more to come. And for us, it's one of the key messages we want people to understand is this is a real thing, and it's been a real thing for a while. You can come, pay your money, it's like a video production shoot, walk away with a hologram, and deploy it in experiences across many devices.
So if I'm a client, I can come and use your facility with your expertise?
Exactly right, yeah, and we treat it like a video production. It just happens to be a volumetric video production. So the creative process is very similar. We start off with pre-production discussions, we look at wardrobe, we look at audio, everything else, and you just walk away with something that's a richer form of video media.
So I'm going to go down and talk to each of you a little bit about what you think is coming. I asked everyone to try and come up with a prediction. If you didn't, too bad. And then we're going to open it up for the audience to ask these just brilliant people some questions. And so be thinking about that before we do it. Let's start out. Here's the question. Is VR viable enough to live in all of these spaces today? Anybody want to take that? Because I think there's a big question mark about that. Ted, you look like. Go ahead, Raphael.
Yeah, we can go.
I have my opinion, but you should.
Yeah, I'm open to.
I mean, you got to think.
When you say spaces,
Well, you've got entertainment space, you've got learning space, you've got health space, you've got, so many verticals, right? All of these different verticals. Is there a place in every one of these verticals for mixed reality, virtual reality,
Absolutely,
and immersive
yes.
media?
100% yes.
Disputably.
Yes.
And is there a way for it to make money for all of these
Absolutely
verticals?
yes.
So one example I'll give probably, how many of you watched Shark Tank here? So the episode that was shot in December, Intel, Sony Pictures, Dell and Deloitte, we have an initiative called Innovation Studio, 10,000 square feet volumetric and laser scan facility. So digital preservation of set is pretty important. In fact, a lot of interviews were shot. You can see there's a Variety article just published last week that was done add this Sony volumetric studio. So technically you're consuming the already content produced in volumetric and this immersive technique, you just don't even know about it. So that's kind of like in a level of sophistication that's been achieved. And again, our attempt today for bringing Greece in immersive way is also like next steps towards to crossing to that barrier.
I guess my question is, I can see practical uses. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute because I totally believe in this immersive reality like you wouldn't believe, as Mr. Trump would say. The question is this an entertainment tool, a teaching tool, or a learning tool?
All the above.
All the above. All of the above.
Where's it going to succeed immediately?
It's already succeeding in all those places,
Really?
actually mightily, quite well. So if you really look at what's really going on, you're evolving the screen. That's what virtual reality and augmented reality, mixed reality is. That's kind of where my thesis sort of lives, is if you believe that all the little shards of glass that are 5-6 inches that you're all holding and staring at all day long is the last device and the last formulation of entertainment, socialization, media, healthcare, heavy industry, light industry, and your daily use, if you believe that this device and this form factor is the last form factor you'll ever see, you don't belong at CES. You shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't really even be paying attention to what we're talking about. What we're talking about is dynamic change. Things are always changing. It doesn't mean that certain things don't hang around longer than other things. Two-dimensional rectangular screens are extremely valuable and extremely popular in lots of ways. But it is absolutely not the last kind of screen you're ever going to look at and interact with. And what we're all doing on the front end of that is experimenting with all of the things that say, wouldn't it be better or more interesting or more compelling or more valuable if we can break out of the rectangle and create a trackable screen that actually acts in a spatial way, that does more than just a two-dimensional screen living in a motion picture or a household or in your pocket. And that's the point of all this. And there are probably hundreds of thousands of really good, economically viable examples in every vertical that already exists today. Are any of them making hundreds of billions of dollars yet? No. Are some of them making many, many millions of dollars? Yes. So we're on our way to bigger pieces of the pie as we start to sort of subtract from the 2D rectangle into the spatial trackable screen. And then the economics will change quite dynamically over the next 10 years.
I think that's your prediction, and that's the period on the end of that sentence. Start with Raffaella. We're just going to come down the line. One last word.
Predictions-wise, Ted always talks about the inevitable evolution of the screen, right? I think attached to that, there is the inevitable evolution of interactivity. I don't think it's going to be just active. I think it's going to be active and passive, or voluntary and involuntary. We've seen eye tracking, we've seen voice recognition, we've seen a bunch of different things, but it's also blood chemistry sensors or anything else like that. And I think once we get to having a true mix of that, that's when you're going to have true, seamless, individualized information being delivered. And I actually think it's also possibly going to change a little bit the way that we interact with each other. I think we would have more than just the 5 senses.
There's an entirely new panel to be done on the use of blockchain, voice technology, and AI.
Yeah, I would say I think when 5G, AI, and XR come together in a very seamless and elegant way, that's when we're going to see really kind of a rocket ship trajectory for this space. I look at 2 big problems, and I think when I talk about XR, really, it's most I think most assumptions is that AR type smart glasses are going to be the bigger market long term than VR. And I think the 2 big problems that I believe need to be solved is there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the micro display space. It turns out it's a huge challenge to get the brightness, the angular resolution at the right power, the right thermal, the right cost. It's a big challenge, and it's going to take some time to figure that out at the right form factor to get the small devices. And then on the software side, I really think, if you think about how we use our smartphones today and how ably and nimbly we application switch and move from Facebook to Twitter to Uber to Grubhub to messaging to navigation to calls, and with a little flick of the thumb, we're really going to need a better way when we have these things on our face, and it's going to have to get me through my day in a much, at least as easy or productive way than that. So I don't want to be talking to my glasses all day, and I don't want to be waving my hands.
Yeah, to me that's one of the barriers, and that is ease of use.
Yeah. So I think that whoever solves that input mechanism and bringing it all together, and at the end of the day, I think it's going to have to be powered by AI, because your device is almost going to need to know what you want to do before you do. And it's going to need to take all that contextual information that's available on the sensors on the device with the total history of everything I've ever done, every decision I've made on the device, and present to me what it thinks I want to do.
So interesting, if you think about the sort of the next level of voice technology and how by 2020 they're saying that 50% of search will be done by voice. So there's a lot of connections between the stuff we're talking about. Ted, short?
You got mine already.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Ravi.
So we just don't like to predict future, we like to build it. So that's what we are good at. And a couple of examples, 5G is also going to be really a transformative technology, because it's not just about making your smartphone faster, it's about like in a cloud, network and edge. Transformation is happening. A lot of compute and storage going to come towards the edge that will help you drive your immersive experience much better, because we are moving lots and lots of data. Device to device communication is to happen rapidly. So you will see some phenomenal transformation in coming years.
5G, ATSC 3.0. Dave?
We are very motivated and excited about the idea of having holograms be something that you use personally and value personally. So important people and moments in your life, you're able to go and get a hologram and keep them and curate them over the years as yet another way of preserving moments and people who are important to you. The tech exists now, we just need to build out the social infrastructure, the consumption and sharing infrastructures, and we think that'll be a very meaningful thing for all of us in our lifetime.
Great.
Moving from a fragmented experience to multimodal, multi-channel, which means users connecting with hundreds of edge devices, traditional computers, wearables, consumer applications, environment, sensories, and multi-channel being computer sensors and human senses, something more holistic, also AI-driven, and something empowering the customer, so the adaptive experiences, a customer actually controlling the data feed or the experience themselves.
Fine.
Blockchain.
I want to allude to on the hologram side, just a very social observation here. Just in Brazil, and 200 years back, there was a museum, National Museum of Brazil, built by King João VI in 1818. Unfortunately, in September, the entire museum was burned down. It was 20 million artifacts. It's one of the Museum of Humanity. There's a lot of artifacts, one of the best museums in South America, completely burned down to ashes. Imagine we had technologies like volumetric, or at least those object has been captured, and hologram, at least we can able to preserve that digitally for the generations to come. So this is not just about the technology and story, it's about your social responsibility, also how to preserve and present your digital future for the generations to come.
Clearly, we've talked about the primary thing for all of us is the story. There's no doubt about that. But you must have the content, you must have the distribution, and you must have marketing for that. Anyone in the audience have something for this distinguished panel before we go? Gentleman over here.
Great talk, guys. Thank you. Steve, you said you could walk away from one of your capture sessions with a holograph ready to deploy. Today, how easy or hard is it to deploy that, like using ARKit or other kind of platform technology?
So that's exactly, we have plugins and sample apps, so any very basic developer can do it. And we've done it, dozens of times.
And then, like, cost per finished minute to do acquisition?
It varies. We quote it like video production, because actually most of the cost is around preparing and doing the production of it. Processing is a cost factor right now, but it's really the whole shebang. So it depends on how many days and props and all that kind of stuff.
And one last question, Pat. You talk about solving for convenience, right? Or convenience culture, right? Phones are super convenient. Realistically, you guys probably have better view on technology. When do we solve for box interface? Like when is it really going to be convenient to use?
Everyone probably has a different prediction. The luxury of working at Qualcomm is that I think we always going to take a long-term, fairly conservative view, because we know how hard these things are to solve. So I think we're going to probably be in my opinion is that we'll be in a converged device world where we're using glasses as a companion device to our smartphones in roughly 5 years. And somewhere between that and 10 years, we might leave our smartphones at home and not panic because we'll have enough functionality on our glasses where we can get through the day. And then, roughly that 10 to plus time frame, maybe we replace our smartphones.
I gotta think it's sooner than that.
Well, here's a good way to think about that last one. If you can remember the first time you had a mobile phone that did something other than make a phone call and extrapolate to where we are today, that's about 25 years. If you can extrapolate from 2014-ish, 25 years forward, it'll take somewhere around that time to fully spit and polish the whole thing. You'll get somewhere within some viability curve within the next 5 years. You're going to see people wearing something that they make a decision not to hold their phone. It may be more audio first than visual, which is already happening. Within 10 years, you will probably have a smartphone, but you probably won't have it with you every day. You'll have something better, and the software stack and the operating systems that run it will be just as viable and just as convenient as your smartphone universe today. That's kind of where it's.
As an interesting proxy, I'm just curious, maybe it's a little bit apples and oranges, but how many in this room have ever purchased a smartwatch? Keep your hands up. Okay, how many in this room who have purchased a smartphone or smartwatch still use it? So I think that's going to be a similar thing we go through with these smart glasses, right? We'll buy them. We might have a little bit of buyer's remorse for the first, second, third generations, and we may not get complete functionality out of using them, but eventually we'll get to that device that is the wow device that everyone's going to have.
Like Microsoft Glass. Any other questions?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I was a little surprised you guys didn't talk about was, I remember when ILM XLab was first premiering, one of the demos that they had was basically a short, Star Wars short, where you could walk around and experience different things and you weren't just stuck to a linear storyline like you are in traditional movies. And I think that really helps obviously for rewatchability of not only shorts but potentially long-term movies and or longer movies. And the two talks before you, there was a gentleman who was talking about they have the largest VR theater in the world, 450 seat in Washington, D.C. How long do you think before that's kind of more standard, where you can go to the movie theater and put on a VR headset, or even purchase it at home and put on your headset and be a part of the movie and be your own director? So you can experience, stuff that's happening in the back room while the guys in the front are having their dialogue, or, go down the street while the main action is happening elsewhere. How long do you think before we get to that on a feature-length timeline?
That's a question for you, probably.
Well, I mean, that's today. People are experimenting with that and dancing around that, and they're experimenting with branching narrative and interactive choices. If you look at Netflix recent sort of forays into that, they're doing it at scale, and they're attempting it, and there are others trying it. Steven Soderbergh's Mosaic, yep. It was very successful for Netflix, and Mosaic was successful. That was Steven Soderbergh's experiment in nonlinear storytelling. Nothing that I would say is
Halcyon would be an example of that.
Halcyon, yeah. Nothing I would say is like hyper massive at scale yet, but there are definitely people dancing around long form narrative and blending the idea of interactivity and narrative together. It's a big part of what we're doing, what we're experimenting with.
Yeah, I think my other question, completely unrelated, is holograms. Where are there actual holograms? I mean, you're looking at stuff that's projected onto a screen, stuff that's like, mirrors angling that are just kind of faking holograms. You think of a classic, again, Star Wars, and they're talking to each other or they're playing the chess game. Like, where are actual holograms and how are they being implemented?
You're talking about the display devices, like glasses free displays?
No, like an actual freestanding hologram.
So there are lots of still ones that are real holograms. They're taken with a laser, coherent light, and they actually reflect back every single pixel that was taken, which is why it looks real. It's a hologram. We're solving for X on the video version of that, the moving pixel version of a hologram captured with what's called coherent light, so that every pixel is actually a mirror of what itself is. It's a ways out, but it's coming.
Yeah, there are a lot of people working on that problem. Huge demand for it.
Thanks.
I think we have time for one last question. Sir?
You all talk a lot about the commercial space, but what about the nonprofit? Do you
y'all see anything interesting out there?
I can go. Even on the VR side, if you think about VR commerce, it's often been spoken about, and consumers maybe are not really using it yet. But on the nonprofit side, there are quite a few companies that are trying to use VR as a way to immerse you into that specific situation, and then get you to donate money directly there. So it's a different way of doing commerce in VR. Just one example.
So
one of
go ahead.
One of our partners, Reality Co, works with immersive experience to benefit the planet. They've created 2 movies, Giant and Tree, and the third one is Breathe, and they've won various awards. They're also doing something towards world peace. So I mean, using immersive experiences for the betterment.
And I think that Turner is doing something with Captain Planet also in the same space. I want to thank our panel, starting at the end with Raf, and then Patrick, Ted, Ravi, Steve, and Preeti. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here with us.